Hello, and welcome to My Week in Baseball. I'm your host, Phil S. Truth Harrison. You're listening to Season 5, Episode 3. All episodes are available in both video and podcast format at myweekinbaseball.com or subscribe on YouTube at My Week in Baseball, and be sure to click the like button. First, thanks to Rose Petal Studios for the logo and artwork created especially for this show. Learn more at rosepetalstudios.com. And many thanks to Ari Estruth in Nashville for our most excellent intro music. Well, today we've got for you the historic likelihood of your favorite team making the playoffs, how the ABS automated ball strike system shrinks the strike zone and what that means, an unlikely incident with the foul pole, JT Ginn and a nearly no-hitter for the A's, and what are the odds of facing a hitter during their best week? Of course, we'll also have a timely limerick, our baseball limerick, along the way, so let's get right to it. We'll begin with today's trivia question. Now, you know about the foul pole, the line separating fair from foul in the corner of both left and right field. And you also know that a ball that's hit on the so-called foul pole is actually fair and indeed a home run. But what's the most unusual play involving the foul pole or the name of the batter involved? It happened just recently. So that is our trivia question for today, and we'll have the answer for you a little later in the show. Next up, how often does each franchise make the playoffs? Well, I get this information from a clever thread on Reddit that was posted 2 years ago. So if your team has recently made the playoffs, their odds have likely improved slightly since the time of this post. So credit for this goes to user Brooks Gate, that is at Brooks_Gate. So it is a very clever diagram that shows the likelihood of every franchise based on the total number of seasons that they've made the playoffs, the chances that that franchise have made the playoffs over the years. Now, of course, if your franchise has been around a long time, you had to actually win your league to make the playoffs because only one team from each team made it. Now, in the present day, it's much easier since 6 teams from each league are making the playoffs. But let's take a look. So this pyramid design is clever, and at the very top is a team you may love or you may hate, but you likely won't find the result unexpected. It's the New York Yankees. They are number 1 in baseball 48% of the time they've made the playoffs. Isn't that remarkable? Almost half the time. What a fun team to be a fan of, right? And the pyramid is kind of designed to go like this. So the Yankees are at the top, and then it goes down with different levels, till it gets to the very bottom level of teams that make the playoffs. And then at the end, there's actually a team below the bottom of the pyramid. So we'll mention that in just a moment. So the Yankees, number 1. Number 2 are 2 teams, one who won't surprise you, one who will. The Los Angeles Dodgers make the playoffs 30% of the time. Pretty impressive. Going back, of course, to Brooklyn and all their history in the major leagues. But the team that might surprise you are the Tampa Rays. They make the playoffs 35% of the time of their existence. They're a relatively new team, and they've been in the playoffs that often. So that surprises me. That's tier 2 on the pyramid. And the pyramid gradually goes down. I'm not going to read you every single team, but I'll mention a few of them. The Red Sox are in the 4th tier of the pyramid at 20% of the time. Same tier as the Atlanta Braves, 24%. And the same tier, surprisingly, as the Athletics, also 24%. And it's the same tier as the Giants, the jersey I'm wearing today. San Francisco Giants, 22% of the time. Of course, they also go back to their days in New York as well. And on that same tier, the Blue Jays. So the Braves, the A's, the Giants, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, all in the 20 percentiles and in that 4th tier. If you keep on going down, one tier below that, surprisingly, the Colorado Rockies, they haven't been around very long, and the Los Angeles Angels, or previously California Angels, or the Anaheim Angels, whatever you want to call them, about 16% of the time. But if you go down to the very bottom tier of the triangle, the Tigers, unfortunately, fall into that tier. At 13%, they're in there with the Pirates, who are more like 14%, the Reds, 13%, San Diego, 13%. The Orioles, 12%. That actually surprises me. I would have thought they might have been a bit higher than that. And the Seattle Mariners are in there around 11%. Those teams are all in the lower tier of the triangle. But there's one team that misses the pyramid completely. And that is a longtime team, the Chicago White Sox, at just 9% of the time. So from the Yankees at 48%, down to the White Sox at 9%. Anyway, it's kind of a fun graphic. I like the layout, and the little logos for all the teams are used. I think I forgot to mention Tier 3, which is right after the Dodgers and the Rays. The St. Louis Cardinals, 26%. That actually doesn't surprise me too much because they have been quite good historically. The Diamondbacks, 27%, and the Houston Astros, also 27%. So some of the teams that have done quite well as far as making the playoffs. I hope your team was near the top. So next up, walks, and more walks. Why? Because of the ABS strike zone. The automated ball and strike zone actually is shrinking the zone in a few ways. So one thing that might be obvious are the sides of the strike zone. The sides of the strike zone now are really right at the edge of the plate. So it's very tight. There are no more wide strikes. That is part of the reason. The other thing is that now, rather than being kind of roughly at the knees, roughly at the chest, the strike zone is actually based on a percentage of a player's height, not their stance. We've mentioned that before, but their height. And the top of the zone now is lower than it has been in the past. In fact, it's quite a bit lower. It is a full ball width lower at the top of the zone. Well, a ball's average diameter is just shy of 3 inches, about 2.9 inches. So you're talking about almost a 3-inch difference, a full ball width difference at the top of the zone. The bottom of the zone is a tick lower, not the full ball width though, just barely. But the bottom of the zone, you can get more low called strikes with ABS than with the human umpires historically, and your top of your zone is a little bit lower. But overall, especially with the sides shrunk in, the strike zone is smaller. So what is the result of that? Well, you probably can guess. Walks are up. In fact, walks are up significantly, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. Curiously, though, strikeouts remain the same. So I did my own calculations on this, and I did these calculations per plate appearance since walks don't officially count as an at-bat. But I'm going to take a quick look at that with you. So in 2026 versus 2025, and the other thing I'm going to throw out here is when I look at 2025, I took the year as a whole. When I'm looking at 2026, I'm only going through today's date. I'm recording this on May 26 of 2026. So I'm not trying to compare this point of the year a year ago, just the total. Anyway, so the percentage of walks as a percentage of total plate appearances, by my calculation, last year was just shy of 8.5%. 8.4% of plate appearances resulted in a walk. Well, this year, it's over 9%. 9.3% of plate appearances result in a walk. 8.4, 9.3. Maybe that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually an 11% increase in walks. Walks are actually up 11% from a year ago. That's pretty significant. Strikeouts, interestingly, are virtually identical. Last year, they were 22.2% of plate appearances. This year, 22.1%. So it's within less than a 0.5% difference there. So strikeouts virtually the same. The other thing that I just thought I would look at, interestingly, was home runs. A year ago, home runs made up 3.1% of plate appearances. This year, 2.8. So that's actually a decrease of 10.5%. So home runs as a percentage of plate appearances are down. Now, that might be, and I'll talk about some other stats here in a minute, it might be because we're so early in the season, and as a general rule of thumb, the earlier part of the season is more likely to favor pitching. Why? Because the weather is cooler, the ball travels better in the warm weather. So we're likely to see an uptick in hitting as we progress through the season. But right now, home runs are down by 10.5%. Batting average wise, also down quite a bit. Last year's batting average, Major League Baseball wide, 30 teams wide, 245. This year it's only 239. So if your favorite player is hitting above 239, they're actually above average. Curiously though, on base percentage is slightly higher. Last year, 315 on base percentage. This year, 318. Batting average is down, on base percentage is up. Why? Because we just talked about it. Because of the ABS system, walks are up. They're up significantly. And on base plus slugging, though, is down. And you could say, hey, home runs are down. That makes sense. On base plus slugging last year, 719. This year, 705. So when you hear that phrase like OPS plus, the batter's, so many percent above or below league average, that league average for on base plus slugging is just 705, which is the lowest it's been in a while. So anyway, those are the stats. And I just wanted to bring that up, that the automated ball strike thing really is shrinking, tightening up that strike zone. You can say it's more fair, and I'm sure it is. I think there's also something to be said for the human umpire and the possibility that the strike zone's a little wide tonight. The strike zone's a little high tonight. The strike zone's a little low tonight. And that now that really can't happen anymore. The strike zone is really the same game after game. So walks are up. They're up by 11 percentage points over a year ago. So next up is our Blimerick. And this week it is a tribute to the ABS system and the increase in walks. So here we go. Was it third strike or fourth ball? Let the robo-wump make the call. To walk I'm more likely, tap my hat so politely. High strike overruled, base on balls. Next up, if you're a fan of the formerly Oakland A's, you may have seen the recent game where pitcher JT Ginn threw an almost no-hitter. It was Monday, May 18th versus the Los Angeles Angels in LA. Now, the Angels are certainly bad this season, but this is still a terrific feat with a heartbreaking end. If you didn't see it, even if you did, I'm just going to kind of reestablish the scene for you here. So Ginn has pitched 8 innings with no hits, 10 strikeouts, and just a single walk that separates him from a perfect game. He's thrown 99 pitches when he comes in to pitch the bottom of the 9th inning. Now, number 9 hitter for the Angels, Adam Frazier, leads off, and he gets 2 quick strikes against him. But on the third pitch of the at-bat, on a low, slow slider that appears to be just below the strike zone, Frazier singles on a sharp liner to center field. End of the no-hitter. But still, a one-hitter would be an amazing feat. Let's keep rooting for JT Ginn. The next batter up, now the Angels' leadoff hitter. We've flipped the order. Shortstop Zach Nato starts off with 2 balls. Again, on the third pitch of the at-bat. Now, this is Ginn's 105th pitch of the game. This time on a hard sinker at 94 miles an hour in the lower third of the strike zone. Nato hammers the ball to deep center, 413 feet, and over the wall. It's the end of the shutout. And not only that, but now it's a walk-off loss for the A's. It ends up being a complete game for Ginn, 105 pitches, a two-hitter, but the Angels win the game 2-1. What an ending. You have a 1-0 lead going into the ninth inning. You've got a no-hitter going. Base hit, home run, game over. Now, I happened to be listening to this game right at the end. I got a little alert on my phone that said there was a no-hitter through 8, and I thought, wow, through 8, that matters. No-hitter through 5 or 6. So what? In fact, a lot of times the guy doesn't get to finish the game, but a no-hitter through 8, this is important. So I quickly got onto that game and listened to that ending, and it was just heartbreaking. I actually like both the Angels and the A's pretty well. I'm happy for the Angels to win a game. They don't win very many games, to be honest, and Zach Nato is on my fantasy baseball team. That doesn't hurt. But I'm really rooting for JT Ginn in this instant. I mean, wow, to be able to be that close to a no-hitter, you really wanted him to get it. Well, hats off to Ginn for a well-pitched game. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Better luck next time. Next up, well, let's talk about odds. We're going to talk about the odds in fantasy baseball, and then I'm really going to talk about the odds in real baseball as well. This question came from another player in my fantasy baseball league because something occurred against him. And he said, what are the chances that a particular player, in this case, I think it was Andy Pages of the Dodgers, but what are the chances of any particular player, you pick a name, having their very best week of the year? Now, the question was actually asked as their best game of the year, but at least in our league, it's a head-to-head weekly competition, so it's probably more important if that player has their best week of the year. So we're going to look at this to start out with, at least on a weekly basis. And then further, what are the chances that your opponent in 2 different leagues has the same player having their best week against you? So that's kind of the premise of the question. What's the chance of a player having their best week against you? And then what's the chance of that happening in more than one league? And then I will talk about it in real life. So to figure this out, though, I'm going to make a few assumptions. The first assumption that I'm going to make is that the player we're talking about, say Andy Pages, or pick somebody else, that player is actually good enough that he's going to be rostered on somebody's team. We're not talking about some borderline player who might not be on a roster. Secondly, for 2026, in the league that I play in, there are 21 regular weeks of the season, the regular fantasy baseball season, plus we have a couple of playoff matches that are 2 weeks each. So that actually adds up to 25 weeks of the season. I think you could probably argue that there could be 26 or maybe even 27 weeks, depending on how you want to count the All-Star break, which isn't really a full week, and how maybe you want to count the opening week of the season, which again isn't really a full week. But I'm going to say there's 25 weeks. And thirdly, I'm going to say that you're playing in a 10-team league. So there are 9 opponents plus yourself. There are 10 possible teams that a named player might actually be on. That includes your own team. So the chance of any given player, like Andy Pages, of being on the team playing against you is just 1 in 10. They could be on your team. They could be on one of the other 9 teams. You got a 1 in 10 chance. The chance of them having their best week in a 25-week season is 1 in 25. So by my math, at least, that's a 1 in 250 chance of a specific player being on the opposing team and having their best week. So that's about 0.4%, less than 0.5% chance that would happen once. Now, the question came in because this happened to a friend of mine in 2 different leagues. So the question came in, what are the chances of that happening twice? And the chance to me of them being on the opposing league in 2 different teams, by my thinking, is just a fraction of that. It would be 1 in 2,500 or 4/100ths of a percent. So my conclusion, it's extremely unlikely. But it is easier, I'm sure, than the answer to our trivia question, which you'll find out in just a bit. So lastly on this topic, what about real baseball? So we just talked about what are the odds in fantasy baseball of this happening? Well, what are the odds of, say, the Giants facing Aaron Judge, who nearly signed with them just a few years ago during his best week? Judge, in fact, went to high school just 95 miles away from San Francisco's Oracle Park. But what are the chances of that happening? Well, first of all, it's more logical to say the best single game of the year for a player than it is to say the best week, because in real baseball, the opposing player plays against more than one team in a week. So I'm going to go to single game in this situation. And the number of games you play against that team varies depending on if they're in your division or your league, or maybe they're in the other league. So for example, in 2026, the Giants and the Yankees played just 3 regular season games. In fact, those games have already been played, so we can look at what really happened. And it's also another consideration is it's rare that a player plays all 162 games, particularly Aaron Judge, who has frequently been injured during his career. Although last year he did play 152 games, so close to a full season. Anyway, there's always that possibility that a particular player does not play at all against your team. But just to keep things simple, we'll say that there were 3 games played out of 162, so that is roughly a 2% chance, slightly below it, actually 1.9. But we'll say a 2% chance of Aaron Judge having his best single game against the Giants. But let's say the player is Shohei Ohtani, who is on the Dodgers. He's in the same league in the same division. Well, in that case, you play 13 games against that team, and the odds of Ohtani having his best game of the year against you are much higher, 8%, 4 times more likely than Aaron Judge. So it really makes a difference on who that opposing player is, in what division and what league they're in. Anyway, so Judge, 2% chance of having his best game. But how did Judge actually do in the 3 games that he played against the Giants in 2026? Well, he batted a partly 154 with 7 strikeouts and 13 at-bats. Not very good. But so although Judge most certainly did not have his best game of the year against San Francisco, both of the 2 hits he got were home runs, and the Yankees won all 3 games. So, sorry, Giants fans. Next up, our trivia answer. So what's the most unusual play involving the foul pole? Or you can tell me the play, or you can give me the name of the batter who was involved. And it happened just recently. Do you have your answer? Well, if you said O'Neill Cruz of the Pirates, you are correct. And here's why. Because on April 22nd of this year, in the top of the 9th inning, with the Pirates batting against the Texas Rangers in Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas, in a 4-4 tie game, Pittsburgh scores a run on a fielder's choice to go up by 1 run, 5-4. And then O'Neill Cruz comes up, still with 2 men on base. Cruz steps to the plate. It's an 0-1 count, and he pulls a cutter down the right field line. It's high. It's deep. Will it be fair? Will it be foul? It's so high that wait, what happened? It bounces. That's right. It bounces directly off the top of the foul pole and into the seats. It actually leaves a mark on the top of the pole. Someone posted a picture online of like a little divot, a little mark in the top of the foul pole. It's kind of unbelievable. How could this happen? Well, the athletics writer Jason Stark asked an astrophysicist the likelihood of such an occurrence, and her answer was, the moon landing is probably easier. So I love that. The chances of hitting a ball off the top of the foul pole, you really couldn't do it if you've tried, But in this game, and in my opinion, that is the most unusual thing that's ever happened involving the foul pole. So your answer to today's trivia question, O'Neal Cruz, the batter, and a ball hitting the top of the foul pole. The Pirates went on to win that game with that 3-run homer, 8-4. So that's all for today, my friends. Join us next time because honestly, what can be better than talking baseball? As always, I'm your host, Phil S. Truth Harrison. We'll see you next time on My Week in Baseball.